Thank you for tuning into this podcast. This week is the finale of Season 1 of John Aloud. A little information before we get started today. We are changing the podcast name to Traverse the Gray, and that'll be the start of Season 2. So some of the branding will change, but it's still going to be the same show, where it's focused on having concise, Christian, constructive conversation. So this week, I had Patrick on the podcast to go over some of the previous episodes, just to go into further conversation, take a look back, and see how far we've come. Again, thank you guys for tuning in and listening to this podcast. It means a whole lot that you guys are here, and enjoy the show. Patrick, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man.
So, as you guys can see, I have Patrick here with me, and we're just going to be talking about clips, going over things.
The
But
one and only.
one thing I wanted to start off first. You remember your episode, the first episode?
I do remember it very well.
Is there anything that you want to just settle on before we get going from that first episode?
Oh, man, there's a lot of things that we could settle on. Me and you have a tendency when we get together to start stepping on some toes and to bring up some controversial subjects. But I can't think of anything.
It's all in love, guys. It's all
in love. It's all in grace. Amen?
Yeah.
I love that word these days in this mushy culture that we live in. Hey, but I do want to say, man, it was cool that I was the first guest that was on here. So when you're big and famous, I want you to bring that up. I want you to bring that up, and I'm the ending as well. But seriously, thanks for having me on.
I'll send you royalties from the podcast.
Yeah, send me royalties. I'm gonna get rich off this. This is fun. I love it, man.
Oh man. So what we're doing today, like I said, is going back looking at clips. So the first thing, the first episode, of course, was with Patrick, and I don't really want to go over that episode again. Not that there's anything bad about it, but we're just both of us here. Why talk about ourselves the whole time?
You're good.
So the first clips I got is the episode where Pastor JP and I sat down. We talked about, is America a Christian nation?
Good question.
That was kind of the main circling point around it. And so one of the questions I asked him was, what is American Christianity? Was kind of the first question that we went into. I think I have a definition of what American Christianity is. It's become more and more of a talking point recently. How would you necessarily define American Christianity?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jonathan. American Christianity, well, obviously, just the words itself define it, Christianity with American slant, and that's not always a good thing, but it's not necessarily a bad thing either. I think just Christianity by itself, without putting a prefix on it, American, Indian, or Chinese, or what is irrelevant. I think it's just Christianity is the study and the belief of Christ. And so many times, it's interesting. We try to believe something through our limbs of our society that we live in, and it's very ineffective. I remember reading a story about.
And so that was most of his main definition of American Christianity. Now, I didn't want to get too deep into it with him. The only thing that I guess I wanted to talk more about, I guess, with you was when he said that it's not necessarily a good thing, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm kind of seeing it from the way with how powerful social media is nowadays, because it's feeding everyone information every day. And so when people think of Christianity, they think of how America is presenting Christianity, which I don't necessarily think is always the best way, at least how it's perceived on social media. Would you say that there's a different way that Christianity is perceived on social media versus what Christianity actually is?
Yeah, I definitely would see that, and I have a lot of thoughts, so this is going to be a fun topic. But if you don't mind, I'll ask you very quickly, so what do you think is, give me a couple points about how you think Christianity, how people view Christianity through the American lens.
Like what I think American Christianity is?
Yeah, what do you think American Christianity is?
American Christianity, in my eyes, because America is a very individualistic culture. We're very big on individualism. And of course there's individualism in the Bible, but it's not solely individualism. And so when we get too strong into individualism, it becomes me, all about me, where the Bible's like, no, not you.
Right.
It's about God the entire time. So then this whole me culture gets mixed in with Christianity, and then this is where you see all these really the Karens of Christians, I guess is what you can call them, or whatever.
Yeah. I had to tell Pastor JP what a Karen was, by the way. Interestingly enough, I said he was explaining something, and I can't remember exactly what he was talking about, but I said, man, that's such a Karen thing to do. And he was like, Karen? What are you talking about, Karen? So I just thought I'd throw that in there. But anyway, yeah, I got what you're saying.
I feel like anyone already just had to explain at least once what a Karen means.
It was a hard thing to explain, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It is kind of if you're not in the cultural whatever, it's a hard thing to explain. So I'll just say this morning I was reading actually in the Bible in Matthew chapter
my favorite chapter.
It's what I'm reading the New Year, so it's the 20th, so it would have been the chapter 21. Is when Jesus was talking about those who, if you want to lead, you have to lead in humility, right? So I think, I think that is a temptation of those who live in America, is that we have a tendency to, make individuality an idol, right? And it all being about us. I mean, you can see that mostly through postmodernism and people believing that they are a truth unto themselves, right?
The whole my truth thing.
Yeah, my truth, your truth, the whole thing. So I think that is a big issue, obviously, that I think is probably unique in America. And I think that's not that individuality is wrong in and of itself.
No.
I think these are the logical conclusions of a lot of the things that we got right in America.
Yeah.
And that is the value of people, the value of humans, the value of individual rights, as expressed in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal and endowed with their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Chief among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. While we're quoting it, which is a good thing to say. But obviously, given to the logical conclusion, when you exclude God's word, you get what you have today. But again, it's not bad. It's just that anytime you take anything that is good from God and you turn it into an idol, then it can become bad. But I don't think that temptation is unique to America.
No, definitely
I think
not.
any society has a temptation to take their values and you take God out of the picture, and that becomes an idol to them. It just happens that in our case is individuality. But I think the answer to that, and I know you probably agree with this, the answer to that is not throwing those values out the window. The answer to that is bringing them back in alignment with God's word. And I think that is a huge thing that we need to do in our country. I have more to say, but
I mean, go ahead.
Well, I will say this last thing, because I think this is a really important question, because we just celebrated quote unquote the anniversary of January 6th, right? And what happened there. So it seems like there are like two sides of the spectrum when it comes to Christian nationalism or American Christianity. There's on one side there's people who think I think if I brought this up last time, actually, with the Beth Moores of Christianity. I don't know if you ever heard of Beth Moore, but
I actually do not know who she is.
Okay, she's a woman preacher, and she is not a very good person to listen to, in my opinion, regarding this subject. And because she thinks Christian nationalism, and listen, there's truth to it, in that Christian nationalism is a really bad thing. They were wrapping the American flag in Christianity, and that only people who wear red, white, and blue are Christians. And what they use to justify this is, for instance, there's this one picture that I've seen over and over and over again, and I've seen it on Christianity Today's website when it was January 6th, just about a couple of weeks ago, was, while they were going into the Capitol, there was a sign that said, Jesus saves. Okay, obviously, that's really bad, right?
It looks really bad, yeah.
It does look really bad. Obviously, we don't agree with that, right? We
agree with Jesus saves, but
not
necessarily the correlation of the event.
Thank you for clearing that up, Jonathan.
Yeah.
We agree that Jesus saves, but obviously you don't have to be American to be a Christian.
Obviously.
And but on the other end of the spectrum, there are those who think that that anything to do with Christian nationalism is a bad thing. And so I would suggest that there is a nationalistic tendency. Jesus said in the Great Commission that he's been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Okay, so Jesus' authority is not limited to merely spiritual matters, but physical matters as well. And so I think any dualism, and what I mean by that is thinking that Christianity is merely about spiritual matters and has nothing to say on governmental issues, is a bad thing. I think it does have something to say about governmental issues. And when we've allowed Christianity in America to have its logical conclusions in our world, there's been good things that have happened. I mean, you think of like Martin Luther King Jr., who's motivated by his faith, and Abraham Lincoln Jr., and even, Abraham Lincoln, and the founders of our country. And so, and then Jesus says to make disciples of all nations and baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. So I think there's nothing wrong with exalting Jesus in our nation. Obviously, we need to do that in a pure way. I could go on and on and on, but I'll just stop there and say that I think we do
in that time frame. That's my bad.
No, you're good. We do need to restore righteousness in the land, and in any way that comes by exalting Christ in our land. But anyway,
this ties in to what you're saying with the next clip with JP, where we're talking about how Paul says, "I've become." What does he say?
All things to all people.
All things to all people.
Yeah.
So that can bring up the conversation in there too.
It's very ineffective. I remember reading a story about Hudson Taylor, who was one of the first missionaries to China years ago. And he went there, and he went with this thought that, he needed to share Jesus with them. Obviously, that was his desire. But with it, he also couldn't help but share, he wore European clothes. They wore robes. He had a European haircut. They had, a long black, piece of hair, shaved head with a long piece of hair down their back. And they ate different foods than he ate. And he wondered after several years of being there why he was so ineffective. And it dawned on him, I think through prayer, that, Paul said, I've become all things to all men, that I may win some. And so he said, well, you know what? If it worked for Paul, it'll work for me. So he shaved his head, started growing a long ponytail, or what did he call that? And started wearing robes, and started eating the food that they ate. And to his surprise, people started listening to what he had to say, started coming to Christ by the droves, and he became a very powerful apostle in the land of China. And it all happened because he tried to stick to the gospel and not try to make it about the culture he was from or society he was from, and because Christianity is the only thing that is cross-cultural.
Yeah.
Every other thing that we have typically it can't be cross-cultural, but Christianity, it seems to know no boundaries. There's no boundaries for Christianity. It works, and it's powerful no matter what culture it's in.
So one thing I thought about going into, or I had a thought after this podcast, I should say, was I kind of feel the American church is behind, at least when it comes to American culture. They're not always up to speed with, current times. There's churches that do it great and stay right on the forefront with how culture is nowadays, and there's other churches that are not at all. And maybe that's just a disassociation of Christians amongst America or the individuals themselves of the churches. But if we're to become all things,
yeah, I got you, to all people,
in America, how do we do that? Like, what I'm trying to think of what that looks like exactly, and I'm kind of thinking it's kind of like engaging online mostly, kind of like not necessarily exactly what I'm doing, but like this is kind of an idea, like trying to get out there into areas of where the church is not. I don't know if that's necessarily a church thing, or is that just like a Christian thing in general?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, it's obviously Christians who make up the church, right? So
yeah.
I think it's both things. I think the church does need to have a voice. Well, there's an aspect of Christianity that never changes, right?
Yeah.
For instance, the church and the gathering of the assembly never changes. So those are concrete, are absolute issues. We worship God, the communion of the saints, water baptism, all those things. Obviously, we know that.
Yeah.
But there are things that are malleable, and how we do things do change, and we need to speak to culture in the way that we preach and the way that we do ministry and things like that. I think that's what you're getting at. If I'm getting it wrong,
you're right.
Steer me in the right direction. But yeah, I think that does come to online issues and things like that. There's no doubt that, there's a guy by the name of Timothy Keller, and I don't agree with Timothy Keller on everything, but he is really one of the points that he really pushes hard is, and he gives evidence for this, that it seems like that as the population of America, or the world, maybe he says, it grows more city-based, and we need to, as a church, I think sometimes Christianity is just seen simply as, good old, just in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a field, worshiping Jesus, singing
a little white
hymns.
church out in the middle of cornfields.
So I do think that we need to become all things to all people, that by all means we might reach as many as possible. That's what Paul says.
Yeah.
And so I think that comes from having an online, ministry like what you're doing here, and that's why I really respect that you're doing this, being serious.
I don't know if I can call it a ministry though, but I know it's with the church. I got what you're saying.
I got what you're saying. You may not want to call it a ministry, but if we're speaking theologically, we all have our ministry in some way, sort. So, and the next thing I would say is that I think, I hate to speak in political terms, but I don't mean this just in political ways. I mean, you can have liberal theologies, liberal or leftist, I better say, left-leaning theologies and things like that. Doesn't merely refer to politics. And but I think the left in our country, again, I'm not just referring to politics, has done a good job, if we're being honest here, of discipling younger people. Right?
Fantastic.
They do
if you look at it
job.
empirically, they do amazing.
They do an amazing job, especially with and I think part of that is because they're just not afraid to speak their values.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just not afraid to do it. Okay, our values sometimes is so wrapped up in, we're just so afraid of being, from just country, redneck, whatever it is. But I mean, these are values that have stood the test of time for thousands and thousands of years, and so we need to stand on those values and preach those values. Things like, I mean, I hate to, I don't want to get controversial, but things like traditional marriage and abortion and even rights that probably led to an idolatry of individuality in our country. So I think they've never been afraid to do that, and so they've discipled our young people in things like atheism, that there is no God. They absolutely just made fun of the fact that we believe that there's a God. They made fun of the God of the Old Testament.
I will say, when it comes to atheism, because Christians like to demonize atheism a lot. Yeah. I mean, there's some reason to, but I guess the demonizing part of the individuals.
Yeah, I would want to demonize it.
But I would say more so agnosticism rather than atheism.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking about the Richard Dawkins and the Bill Maher's of which is we've kind of moved on from them at this point in our culture. They're kind of yesterday's news, but nevertheless,
it moves so fast now.
Yeah, it moves so fast. Nevertheless, they've done a good job. And my whole point is I think we need to take lessons to some degree or another, if you understand where I'm coming from them, and start standing firm on the values that we have, and being bold as they do it. I don't know necessarily what that looks like in our culture, but I think the first thing is just being bold, and just as they do. I wouldn't want to demonize, of course, but
with media in general, because the power of media is becoming more and more known, even though it's been known for quite a while, especially with the emergence of social media. Since I would say more left-leaning people, when I say left-leaning, I say it personality-wise, because generally if someone is in certain traits personality-wise, they'll vote with like a 70% accuracy for people on the left, as we call it politically, versus like people with these personality traits vote for right-leaning things. So usually when you say left and right, you're thinking of different, I say it in a personality-wise. And so the people who were more so on the left understand the new technology a lot more. They understood it sooner.
100%.
And were able to start planting those seeds, and we're seeing those grow nowadays. And there's some good things that come out of it, and also bad things that come out of it, of course.
And I do want to ask you something, but I think a lot of that comes from just what I was talking about. I think Christianity, with the mistake that we've made in Christianity, in my opinion, is we have we've gone away from culture. And what happened with people who have values that are different than us, again, I don't like to just frame it in terms of left and right, but just for the sake of a better word.
Yeah.
People who have left-leaning values have engaged culture, and Christianity have pulled away from culture. And it comes down to this. Do you agree with that? It comes down
100%.
Yeah, it comes down to this I'll fly away, oh glory kind of Christianity. You know, Jesus is coming back anytime soon. And we haven't thought down the road, okay, what the impacts that this is going to have. And I think that's really important. You know, there was a video, I don't know if you've ever heard of Craig Rochelle, but he pastors one of the largest churches in America. I could bet he probably the top 10. And the name of his church is Live Church, I think .tv or something like that. And a lot of people were criticizing him because he was on, now I guess the metaverse is, I don't know, he was on some sort of thing using that to communicate the gospel. So I'd be curious, since you're involved in technology and stuff like that, I mean, what your thoughts on all that is in regards specifically to Christianity and how
I did see something about a church in the metaverse or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's probably the same thing we're talking about.
To show you how crazy I am, how involved I'm not involved. I didn't even know that was up and going yet. I guess it is. I mean,
not technically.
So I don't even know how he was doing that. But do you think that that's an avenue in which, if it takes off, first of all, do you think it'll take off?
Yes.
Like Facebook, Twitter, social media in general did?
Technically, yes. I mean, this is a completely different area. And I'm not 100% informed on what the metaverse is entirely.
Yeah, I got you.
The metaverse is basically trying to create a open marketplace that's like the internet, but like virtually, if that makes sense.
Right.
So it's a place where everyone can be either in. You could implement VR into the metaverse. You could, and it's mostly using a lot of blockchain technology, since it makes everything non-fungible. And my NFT people will laugh at me for saying that way, but nothing can be duplicated. Right. So like it actually has its own technical value because it can't be just duplicated, and something that can't be duplicated online is kind of crazy.
Right.
So it's interesting how the church will approach that, but that's still probably like 5-7 years from now.
Okay. But nevertheless, if it does come to pass that it's a pretty popular thing, that'd be a good evangelistic
could be, yeah,
tool or platform for Christianity to use.
The current ways to do that would be things like Twitch, like YouTube, like Facebook.
Right.
They're the main gathering places on the internet right now. And you can go into darker holes on the internet like Reddit or 4chan or some of those other even more scarier ones. But they're still big gathering places on the internet where people are active and engaging. Because I was using Reddit since I stopped more recently, but I was using it since I was like 12 and 13. And it was amazing how much life knowledge, and it was probably more left informed, I guess politically or personality-wise, left informed information that I got at such a young age. Because you were mentioning how good they did that. I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I saw that in my own life, seeing how much information I got. Luckily, we grew up in an age where we have to process information so much faster that I wasn't able just to be taken by it, and controlled by information.
Yeah.
Because there was barely any church there, any Christians in those spaces. Sort of Facebook, but I don't know. The church doesn't really know how to engage on Facebook.
Well, how could we do better? I'm serious. I'd like to know, like, what. So, as far as the only thing I see the church engaging on Facebook is like a live stream of their services on Sunday mornings. And
I'm not saying churches shouldn't live stream their services or anything like that. But this could be totally subjective. Okay, this is just me looking at it as I would look at any organization or doing anything online. It seems very self-advertising, if that makes sense. So like every church's post is like, hey, come Sunday, hey, show up Wednesday, hey, do this here with 100%. Us, like it. And not that people shouldn't go to church or do those events at churches, because they're always great, or I shouldn't say always great, but most of the time great. There's good people with good intentions trying to do good things with those events. But just from an outside looking in, someone trying to get you to do something with them or for them, seems self-advertising.
Yeah.
And I think the church could shift their focus from the way they're doing social media to a more about you. Because I mean, we're all, and this culture is very me. So I think if a church shifted it to more of a you thing, how can we help you kind of thing, it would probably do a lot better online.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I mean, Christianity has a tendency to take anything and just make it corny. unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Hence Pure Flicks, or something like that. But I do think that, I think one of the mistakes, and I'm not up on all this as much as you are with the technology, but I will say, and this goes back to this, I hate to keep pushing the same thing that I'm pushing over and over again, but I think a lot of the times what Christianity does, and if we're not careful, we can think this way, and it comes back again to pulling away from culture, is that we think that that social media in itself is innately bad, inherently bad.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they thought that about TVs for a long time or anything. That's a mistake, I think.
My favorite argument against like that, what you're saying, is like social media is a tool.
Yeah.
A gun is a tool.
Right.
The gun isn't the thing doing the bad thing.
Yeah.
Social media is not the thing doing the bad thing.
Right.
It's the people feeding the algorithms.
Right.
It's the people holding the guns.
Yeah.
That are doing the bad things.
Yeah.
It's not the tools, it's the people.
Yeah. And we never stop and ask the question, how could we use this to the glory of God? And if we wouldn't have pulled away from culture in the first place, maybe it wouldn't
be as hard right now.
Yeah, maybe it wouldn't be as hard right now. So
if it was easy, then it wouldn't be worth doing.
Yeah. But anyway, back to I do think it is very important that we engage culture. I think that we engage culture by not being apologetic about our values. That's really important to me.
Yeah.
Because I think that that those who disagree with us are not apologetic about our values, about their values, and it shows in the fact that where culture is at today, that that you can just turn on anything, any television show, even if you look at what's going on in Canada right now. I don't know if you're aware of this, but they just passed a bill called Bill C-4 that outlaws any conversion therapy regarding homosexual tendencies or anything like that. Or if you're a male and think you're a girl, and if you're a pastor and you try to, have therapy with that person, then you could be, threatened with jail time. Maybe. So a point being, not that we need to talk about that. I'm just simply saying that this is the result of people who are unashamed of their values and engage in culture. And I think it's so important for Christianity. Again, we don't want to demean people. I would never want to demean people. We need to exhibit the fruit of the Holy Spirit and all of those things. But we need to be upfront about our values and engage culture with our values, because at the end of the day, man, our values are just better.
Yeah.
I think, or they're just better. Yeah. And because an atheistic or agnostic worldview can't account for morality in and of itself. I mean, what standard are they using to determine what is good and what is bad, for example? And I mean, that's one of many issues, but
they mostly say it's subjective, but it's determined by society at large. But then you can't explain like Nazi Germany or
what happens
in Russia.
What happens when there's a society that has deemed their values at large that totally disagree with ours?
Yeah.
Can you say objectively that their values are bad? And presumably not, because
if you're an honest atheist, yes, you will say there's nothing that can suggest it. But
you have no way. You have no way to account for that.
Correct.
Yeah. That's my point. It's just I think that we need to be upfront with our values, hold firm to our values. How we do that with engaging culture with like social media, the metaverse, all that stuff that I do not understand, I'm not really sure, but nevertheless, I think we can start with the fact we're just standing on our values and standing firm with our values and not being apologetic about it.
Yeah. I do want to, while there's still a lot more I think we could unpack here.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we go on that, man.
The next thing kind of ties into where we're going with this discussion, is about, I guess, generational conflict, kind of like with kind of online as well, but like how these two are interacting with one another, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's where this conversation was.
Okay.
In that time frame, I won't beat around the bush, where Ben Shapiro, quote unquote, I mean, you can put any person's name, destroys libtard college student, that was the title you saw all the time going around. But that type of content has been very old. At least when Facebook first started becoming a thing, you had multiple different age groups of people all joining. That's kind of what made Facebook. It was that it wasn't a subcategory of people. It was literally everyone was on this platform. And so there were competing things for algorithms. So I guess the common meme that's thrown around all the time is that these kids nowadays can't even start a lawnmower. Back in my day, so-and-so, da, 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 da. I did want to ask you, Have you seen that meme before?
I have not seen the movie before.
You've never seen
that's,
in your entire time on the internet
I haven't.
that millennials can't start a lawnmower
I haven't
or something
seen
to that degree.
But that is hilarious.
You hold that?
No, I don't hold that view. But I would be interested to know how many millennials can actually start a lawnmower or a weed eater.
Maybe it's just me and the Facebook.
You think millennials
algorithms-
in New York City, if they saw a lawnmower, would be able to start your lawnmower?
Yeah,
I doubt it. Actually, I believe.
they would go. They could go to Google, type in.
Yeah,
how
no
to do it
doubt,
if they
no
didn't know
doubt.
how to do it.
I was speaking solely in terms of that they didn't have Google at the
Because
time.
they got no grass to mow there.
Yeah,
They
no
don't
doubt,
have a need.
no doubt.
Remember, you could figure it out though. They're not
Yeah.
dumb people.
No, yeah, I did. Yeah, go ahead.
It's kind I guess I'm a little more heated about it because like I'm from this conversation, so I
You're
know
good,
where
man.
I'm
You're
coming
good.
from.
You're good. You're good.
You know, it's just a cut at someone, other people, or you know, you have the other way around too, where it's like you're telling me to get off XYZ, and now you're asking me to help you with a computer to get you on Facebook. You know, why are you so dumb? Boohoo boomers. You know, that whole conflict back and forth when it comes to, I guess, generational things. So that's been happening since literally probably the beginning of social media. You know, it's just I don't want to say competing for the home feed, but I guess you may understand what I'm trying to say there. I have to personally, I have to catch myself because I immediately, you know, agree with some of the things that get posted around where it's, I guess, anti-older people. You know, it just immediately reaffirms something that I've literally experienced. But I have to remind myself that's not all older people. That is some, and those some that it is referring to are honestly just needing help. That they need help, whether that be emotionally or mentally or whatever. There's something that's making them hold this belief that all these young kids are dumb nowadays, and same way back and forth on that. Have you noticed that, or is that just something I guess people my age notice?
Well, you know, maybe we're guilty of making fun of rich people.
Yeah.
You know, like, cause I remember with, you know, my cousin maybe saying, I bet he couldn't even change the oil on his car. I bet he couldn't even change a flat tire. Like, you know,
yeah.
That proves how we rule the world because we can change flat tires, you know?
Yeah.
And, honestly, I couldn't tell you the last time I changed well, I probably could tell you the last time I changed a flat tire. But in point of fact, when the last time I had a flat tire, I called, AAA.
Yeah.
Even though I know how, but I didn't do it. I called AAA.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I'm sorry that people, but you know, honestly, I'm a Bible guy,
mm-hmm.
and so I look at the world through. I think I look at the world through Bible-colored glasses, and I see. I try to always see things in a spiritual perspective. And doesn't it just smell like the devil that he tries to get people to be angry at one another and bitter against one another for really no good reason.
Yeah.
I did hear that thing. And I'm sorry that I don't know more about this to describe it better, but there was this thing where this a younger person, I'm guessing maybe in her 20s or something, who said, like, okay, boomer. Like this person who made some kind of statement, all she needed to do to discredit that person was refer to their age. Now, I think technically I'm at the very end of the baby boomers.
Yeah.
You know, I was born in 59, and the way they used to describe the baby boomers as these are the kids of the folks who came home from World War II. Yeah. So when all the soldiers came home, then boom, there was a baby boom. Mm-hmm. And so I was born in 59. So I think they would consider me at the very tail end of that thing. Mm-hmm. So a little bit, maybe I'm personally insulted that somebody would think that you can discredit something that I say just by virtue of the fact that I'm older than you. Yeah. Doesn't that seem terribly shallow?
It is. I mean, it is shallow. I can tell you that it came from, I guess, maybe just the past several years of what seems like, because you see it all the time in news articles where they're like, millennials are all doing this because they're
blah blah blah, or millennials are all doing this. Now it's Zoomers, the Gen Z, are all doing this because they're blah blah blah, and that could just be algorithms seeing that at a face value. This article has a lot of interaction from other people this age. So let's feed them that because it'll keep on the platform for a little bit longer.
Oh, that's a good point. And so it might not even be a valued opinion. That might even not be a pervasive opinion, but somebody writing an algorithm says, hey, this keeps people on the page. Yeah. Keep throwing them this stuff. Oh, yeah.
And it could be going both ways. Like maybe, I hate to say older people, but I'm falling on a...
ageism. They call that ageism.
Yeah, ageism. I'm lacking a term off the top of my head, but like it could be the same way for them, that it's an algorithm that's noticing that this post is getting lots of interactions from people of a similar demographic, whether that's either age, location, or whatever. And it keeps feeding them that. And so maybe that's why I keep seeing all these memes of like millennials nowadays can't even start a lawnmower. I keep saying that just because I've seen that so many times now, that it's practically a meme at this point.
But let me ask you this. Are they feeding us those algorithms because that's what people desire to see, and what people desire, that's what we're thinking, that's what keeps us on longer, and that speaks to what we think already?
Well, it's kind of the same tactic that media or news media has to use currently, because they're a dying company. Like the amount of investment they have in their live TV software and broadcasting and contracts they have with.
Yeah. Did you see where Joe Rogan's views? Did you see this? Where his views on wherever he's platform now is like way more than what Fox News or CNN is getting now. By the way, did you?
Oh, I believe it.
100%.
I didn't know he said anything about that.
Well, I don't know if he said anything about it, but I just seen the the ratings, I guess.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So yeah, that just speaks to the fact that it's yeah.
Well, the strategy they're using, because they are dying, they have to do more desperate acts to get revenue, because their means of revenue is getting attention, either by TV or articles or whatever. And the human psyche, and I explained this in another clip as well, but I might as well just say it now. And I repeat this because more and more people need to know this. Like, this is how they're getting our attention. The human psyche has a 5 times greater reaction to an equal negative stimuli than a positive stimuli. So the example, you find a random $5. You're happy. You lose $5. You're 5 times more angry about losing that $5 than you are happy about finding $5.
Right.
And of course they've known this. This information's not new information. And so they put out negative articles, negative news all the time, because you get such a reaction out of people that eventually that just becomes addicting. This reaction,
right?
And I think we've heard that before, reaction culture or something.
Yeah,
it's ringing a bell in my head somewhere.
Yeah,
reactionary, whatever. But that's the strategy they're kind of using to keep themselves alive.
So let me ask this: it feels like, though, and this goes kind of back to, it feels like young people may be picking up on this to some degree or another. I don't know, because they're so addicted to social media. I say they're so addicted to social media. I would love to see the demographics of people who spend the most time on Facebook, because it feels like Facebook is leaning more now towards the older generation who are just like scrolling through. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And it seems like I've seen, speaking of these ratings, when I was looking at it, Fox News is outdoing CNN by far right now, but it seems like the values that CNN promulgate are more in line with those of younger generations, and Fox News in line with more older generations. And older generations are people who turn on DirecTV at night, not younger people, right?
Yeah.
And so I think they're just sort of, I think younger people are just sort of tired of that that sort of news. I mean, even though you were referring to social media is obviously doing it, but you obviously see this on basic news channels. Am I right about this?
Yeah.
That it's totally negative all the time. Number one, and number two, these subjects are like, I mean, you bring people on to interview them, and it's like a 3-minute interview. Or my favorite is when you have two opposite ends of the people who are quote unquote debating each other, but there's like 3 minutes.
They're just yelling at the same time. There's no articulate conversation.
Yeah, there's no meat there at all. There's no way to come to any sort of objective conclusion or anything like that regarding what they're saying. I think a lot of people, I don't know. I could be wrong. Again, I have nothing to back this up or prove this with, but I think a lot of people seem like they're picking up on this, especially when you look at someone like what Joe Rogan is doing and these 3-hour interviews with people and getting into the quote unquote the nitty gritty with people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, what people want is genuine
substance.
Yeah. They just like what's the ITY version of genuine? I can't think of it. But they just want genuine people talking. And usually what people want to learn is not someone who, like if you want to learn a subject about X, you don't want someone who knows everything about X to teach you about it. You want someone who knows just a little bit more than you about X to teach you it, because they're a lot more relatable to you. They were just in the steps you were in to learn about X.
Yeah.
And so you see this with a lot of news media. They bring people who are the experts. For whatever reason, they're called experts. Okay, I guess I gotta take that back because that's rude to say. People who have spent a lot of time learning about a subject.
They are real experts.
They are real experts.
Sometimes.
Most of the time.
Yeah. They're not God though.
But people in general can't learn from that. They have to be just a few steps or a step behind that person to really learn like their real knowledge of X subject, versus like the vast majority of people aren't experts on the topic. They're either way behind, knowing nothing, or just 1 or 2 steps into learning about that subject.
So it takes some knowledge to know something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And have you ever heard, what's that graph called? It's the graph of like your knowledge and confidence in a topic.
Right.
I forget Dunning. I don't think it's that.
I haven't heard of it.
Okay. Anyway, well, the graph goes like this. So you have knowledge on your x-axis and confidence in your y-axis. And so as you learn more, you go like this, you hit the peak, and then you come back down as you learn more about it.
Right.
And then your confidence goes up like this.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are right here at this peak when it comes to knowledge on politics or science or whatever.
I agree with that.
They have such high confidence. Same, like it gets us all. We all have this false confidence in a lot of topics.
Right.
But the only way you get from here to this high first peak is by learning more.
Right.
And then you realize, I really actually don't know anything.
And the way we're doing things right now with the news media, social media, things like that is not conducive to producing knowledgeable citizens in our country, right?
That's why Joe Rogan can make a 3-hour podcast about one niche topic or a subject to similar subjects versus a news show, an hour news show, who talks about 6 or 7 different things within that hour with 10 different people, having no real substance, but what sells them on it is the anger involved between the two people, the drama. I mean, it's basically reality TV, but serious.
100%. Yeah. And so do you feel like this is going back to what you were talking about in that video, is this like an older generational issue or a younger generational issue, or is this something we deal with both equally? I'm curious kind of where you're going with this.
I feel like it's both. Yeah. So like we both generationally have different issues. Yeah. Because we're all a lot of us younger people, younger millennials and Zoomers, grew up in social media. We don't know a time before social media, really. Maybe not necessarily millennials. The youngest millennials, like myself, kind of remember before social media. Yeah. Because being born in 95, social media came around in the late 2000s. I was just a young teenager at that time. And so
I remember getting on it for the first time. It was very addicting.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so our brains developed in that environment. Yeah. Versus people who are older, Gen X, the baby boomers, their brains developed outside of this. So they're having to react to social media differently than we are. And so since we're both having different, I guess, problems with the same platform or the same technology, I should say, we look down on each other because I understand this part of this technology because I grew up in it. Like, it makes sense to me. Versus older people are like, this part doesn't make sense, but this part makes sense 100% because I understand human interaction a whole lot. Right. And so, I'm not saying that younger people don't have human interaction or older people don't understand technology, but on a broad scale.
Yeah. And you think this is contributing to the divide among younger and older people?
I think so. I can't say I know like the whole problem itself. Right. I think I have bits and pieces though, and I'm just trying to connect them. But
right. Well, I can't speak to the technology side of things because I don't know much about them. But I will say in the church world, speaking, if we go there, it seems like there is a, you'll see churches that put on display their mostly white churches who put on display their diversity, but there's not a lot of, there are some churches that talk about how they're multi-generational, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But a lot of churches, especially in the kind of the church growth movement and the seeker sensitive attractional model church movement, I don't know if you know what I mean when I say that, but
I know some of those words.
Yeah. Basically churches, well, their philosophies of church models is what I mean. I don't know if you know what they mean. And basically is that, you just, the extreme, not all churches like this, but the extreme is you just put on a show on Sunday morning to attract people. Mm-hmm. And mostly that show, and mostly churches like that, just like want to put on a stage just young people. You know what I mean? And in my opinion, I don't know if that's where you're going with that, but in my opinion, that contributes I think young people can get the idea from that sort of church philosophy that there's nothing to learn from older generations, and I think that is a really big mistake. I can't speak of older people. I definitely think that people who are older boomers, like you guys were talking about, definitely look down on younger people talking about not being able to start a lawnmower. Mm-hmm. I think that's such a horrible philosophy, and you're giving up your responsibility to raise people up and to teach them about life. Why would you run someone in the ground about not knowing how to start a lawnmower? Why don't you teach them how to start a lawnmower?
It makes you feel better about yourself. Like if you can identify part of a problem. I've been saying this for so long, like the people who say you are the problem, that saying that's been going around for the past since 2016, you're a part of the problem. That saying in itself like reveals the idea behind like I see you as the problem and I know I'm not the problem, so I don't have responsibility in fixing the problem.
Right.
You have the responsibility to fix the problem because you are it. And I'm trying to say this at least as much as I can, that like, no, we're all a part of the problem. All of us need to have responsibility in this. And I think the church likes to, like you said, when we separated from culture, what was that, in the 70s or 80s or something?
Man, I wouldn't even know, but it's been going on for sure.
When I feel like that's kind of where that kind of like that idea of like you're part of the problem, drugs are the problem, or the internet's the problem, or things like that, bad things on the internet are the problem. It's like, yes, they're bad, but it's still the people that are making the decision and the people that are either enabling them to do that or being dismissive to them doing things and not, like you said, engaging the culture and those things.
100%. And it comes down to, I think, and I know this sounds so cliche, but I think it's so true. It's like, how can I be a part of the solution? Mm-hmm. And that's a good question because that comes back to personal responsibility. Yeah. Like what can I do? No, seriously. Like how can you be a part of the solution? Yeah. Because if you just simply pointing out issues, is that leading us to a quote unquote greater good, whatever you think that greater good is in society? Is it? And it's probably not. But I don't know if you ever heard of G.K. Chesterton, but he was a famous preacher, and there's an interesting story from him. He was asked, there was this, I think it was, I may be getting the story wrong to some degree or another, but there was a news organization or something like that who was sending out questions about, asked all these pastors or priests or whatever, asked them the question, spiritual leaders, what is wrong with the world? I mean, that's such a relevant question today. And a lot of people are answering that question. Everyone has opinion about that question.
Everyone's got an answer for it.
And G.K. Chesterton famously wrote back and said, in response to your question, what is wrong with the world? The only answer that I can give you is that I am what's wrong with the world, right? Mm-hmm. And that's such a good question. And by the way, it's a distinctively Christian answer to that question, because the doctrine of sin, even though we don't like to talk about that anymore, especially in speaking of the attractional model church, that comes from, again, this is the extreme, but you think of the TV preachers where they get on TV and just it's about self-motivation and things like that, and very rarely is it talk about sin. Well, the doctrine of sin is very important because the Bible says that you will die in your sins. And the doctrine of sin teaches personal responsibility. So when we teach the doctrine of sin, we can understand that one way, the first way, and the chief way that I can make society a better place is not to start with you, but to start with me.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's really important. And I think that's important for every generation to understand, is that I start with me, making me a better person. And then when we become a better person, that comes from what I was just reading today again in Matthew chapter 20 or 21, is that if you want to be great, it starts by serving. And so how do you serve the older generation, young people, or how do you serve the younger generation, older people?
Yeah.
Is by taking personal responsibility.
I like that.
Yeah.
100%.
Thank you.
So this next section of clips is kind of taking a turn a little bit. It does still deal with some of the big hot topics that we talked about in the past thing, but it's going into race. I know, hilarious. 2 white guys talking about race.
Yeah, we know so much, right?
So I had a conversation with Heather. I don't know if I'm saying her last name right. Byron. She has a really interesting. She did a lot of study on the topic of reconciliation, because there's honestly needs to be some sort of reconciliation within the church when it comes to race. You know, it's just the elephant in the room. So I asked her kind of basically straight up, so what is reconciliation? And I liked her answer on it.
To say reconciliation is 3 things. It has to do with forgiveness. That's, I guess the given, but I would say the 3 things that are necessary for reconciliation, because it's really hard to pin down, would be, you have to have justice. You have to have responsibility from both parties. The offended and the offender. And you also have to be somewhat in relationship with that person. It's not that person or entity or whatever. It's not something that you can just shut off from your life in a sense. In this society especially, it's very common for people to say, oh, well, they're toxic. Let me just stay away from them.
Cancel them right now.
Yes, canceled. So you see how much TV I watch. Not that much. But basically, in order to really truly reconcile with somebody, you actually have to be in relationship with them.
So she goes further into how it's very relational. And it seems very hard to do in the church world, I should say. It's very hard to have these fellowships with other churches, because to me it seems like, I don't know, and this could not be what churches are trying to do at all, but at least how it looks from an outside perspective, it looks like every church is like, and this could be in combination with how churches interact in social media, everyone's like, hey, come here, no, come here, come here, come here, and then once you're here, they want you to stay here. And of course, like, you're supposed to stay within a house because the house divided amongst itself won't stand, but we're all still one big church, if that makes sense.
Right.
So maybe does the church need to do more, I don't know, not intermingling, what is it called? Like fellowship amongst each other?
Right. Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not speaking in terms of race right now, but
because there's white churches, black churches, Latino churches, so I mean, like, and they're all in our area as well. And so, I mean, like, it could be about race, but also, like, not even race as well, just other churches in general.
Well, so I was just speaking just in terms of denominational, barriers. I mean, when we speak of the Big C church, as a lot of people like to say, sure. I mean, I think we need to understand, a lot of times this is an attack from Catholics to Protestants. You're so divided. Look at all the different denominations just within your within your sphere. You have Baptists and Methodists and Pentecostals and non-denominational, interdenominational, which I don't know. Anyway, so you have all these differences. So I think that there is a case to be made that we need to understand the importance of the Big C Church and do more fellowshipping with each other. But I also think that distinctives matter, and I think that is important. So I'd be curious just to ask you very quickly. I mean, so what makes us different from other people? I mean, how important is like secondary issues that church divides over? Like, for instance, you take from Baptists and Presbyterians between dunking someone to sprinkling someone, or infant baptism and things like that. I mean, how do you see it possible for all these Protestant denominations to really come together in unity? Do you see it as a possible thing?
Yes, in theory, but
what would it take? Now, I'm saying, like, what would not as what we do, but what would it take? Would it take just for us to take mere Christianity, as C.S. Lewis, the name of his book, but I'm not referring specifically to that, like for us to come together in unity with mere Christianity and to deem secondary values that we disagree with, like, for instance, Calvinism, Arminianism, and things like that, to deem those issues that we need not divide over?
I think because America is such big on individualism, that there has to be the right answer. You know, we have to have the right answer. And so, because this is me we're talking about, I have to know what I'm doing. I need to be sure I'm walking in the light, you know?
Yeah.
And of course, the aim of the podcast is, you know, to traverse the gray, get through the unknown, to learn, to understand, and to have conversation. So it seems in American culture, and of course this bleeds into Christians who are American, conversing and having deep conversation, a real conversation with other people about hard to discuss topics, you know, like things you were mentioning, haven't really been taught, or they don't necessarily, I don't think they come easy for everyone.
Right.
But it certainly hasn't been taught.
Yeah.
I don't mean to knock on. There was a program Liberty did. It was like the Next Steps program. I think it was Highlands, the church they did. I'm not trying to say anything bad about Highlands Church. I just had a disagreement with something that they said in their Next Steps program. Basically, that you don't read anything outside of the Bible.
Right.
No other ideologies or anything like that. And it's like, well, if I'm supposed to engage people in who may be a part of those cultures those ideologies are strong in, how am I going to engage with them and connect with them if I don't have any understanding of what they inherently like grew up in and know? So I'm not saying like we should I mean, I wouldn't say it hurts to read the Quran to understand if you want to talk, like if you have a passion to talk with Muslims and connect with them and I won't say convert's the wrong word, but guide them to Christ. You know, you're going to have to understand the Quran some. You're going to have to understand either Middle Eastern culture or Muslims are over the whole world. So all these cultures that you're going to have to engage in. You know, so you're going to have to engage with other ideologies. And if my steps to becoming a better Christian with them was to not learn anything else, that's stood with me wrong. Now, of course, we're in a classroom setting. I could have debated the teacher right then and there. This is 100% wrong. And I can pull up verses that will say this won't work. But, you know, in the process, like I can have this conversation with you because, you know, we're both on similar grounds. We understand each other. We're not out to get one another. I'm not trying to say you're wrong, I'm right. I think maybe it's just that we have to, as Christians in America, come from a place where it's like, I don't know if I'm right.
Yeah.
I'm wanting to learn.
100%. Well, I agree with that. And the only thing I would add to that is I think sometimes, speaking of American Christianity, and again, I hate to keep going back to this point, but again,
it's such a big topic, though.
Yeah, the attractional kind of model. The thing is like Christianity sometimes, specifically in America, or specifically the West in general, can be so vague that it really doesn't mean anything at all.
Yeah.
And so you're unifying, but you don't know what you're unifying over. You know what I mean? And so sometimes, even though there are denominational barriers, and even though that looks like disunity to people, there still can be unity, even though we're worshiping in different churches, you know, and believe different things. We can still admit that we're our brothers and sisters in the Lord. I would take that over first of all, the Catholic Church, where I'm told what to believe, and the priesthood of all believers is diminished. That's number one. Number two is, and you take kind of, again, that attraction of model church where everything is so vague that you really don't believe anything at all. Yeah. And that what it comes down to on a practical level, and I think you would agree with this, what it comes down to on a practical level is you see people say things like, well, it's not about theology. I just love Jesus. It's not about doctrine. I just love Jesus. Well, as soon as I ask you who is Jesus, you're doing the work of theology. Yeah. As soon as I ask you who is Jesus, you're doing the work of doctrine. As when you start beginning to say that Jesus is the Son of God, you've got to be able to defend that. Mm-hmm. When you say that Jesus is eternal, you got to be able to defend that. When you say that Jesus is the second person of the Trinity, you got to be able to defend that. When you say that Jesus is the only way to salvation, you have to be able to defend that, and that comes down to interacting with the faith and things like that. And I think that is one of the big things we're missing in American Christianity. I've probably gotten off subject a little bit, so I apologize from where that was going. But my point is sure, we do need unity. We need to be in a relationship with other people who disagree with us, and we need to be a part of the Big C church. But we also need to stand firm on truth and know why we believe, what we believe, and why we believe it. And I think that's really important to understand, because I think there's just a lot of shallowness in Christianity today, and I think that's a really big mistake. But I think we treat doctrine and unity as if they're mutually exclusive to one another. Me and you can disagree and still be brothers and sisters. Well, me and you can't be sisters. I think
this humility that we're kind of describing, I don't know. I don't know if it's due to American culture or if it's just due to the lack of teaching humility in churches. But it's like if we're going to try, I'm dragging this back to reconciliation with races. Like if we're going to be able to reconcile racial issues in the church, we have to first be able to reconcile issues with churches of the same race. Like that. Right. Like if we can get over that step and get over other steps of like unifying people in churches and Christians in general, even with differencing opinions, then we can even get to racial issues and unifying there, because we all believe in the same Jesus. Right. So it's not necessarily off topic, but like it's working we're working backwards.
Well, speaking of race, I do believe that there's no doubt that there is a divide between white churches and black churches. Specifically in America. I'd be curious to know if that divide is if there's any other divide among races or ethnicities in other countries. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at that. But I would dare to venture that this is probably unique to our situation. It probably is a result of our past. So we're dealing with the consequences of our sin. Yeah. And the Bible speaks of that. Right, that there are generational consequences to sins, and we're dealing with that today. Yeah. Again, the only caveat I would add to that is what I've been disappointed in the church, and again, this is speaking of bad news, but nevertheless, I'll say it. What I've been disappointed in the church is in the name of fighting racism. I think we've accepted a lot of worldly ideologies.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, with things that are hard to define, but nevertheless, we shouldn't step back just because they're hard to define and hard to and a lot of that is the reason they're hard to define is a part of what they are. They're part of postmodernism, which is just hard. There is no objective truth. There is no objective reality. So they're hard to define.
It's all my truth.
Inherently, yeah.
You can't disprove it.
So, but it comes down to things like critical race theory, or more specifically, what you hear a lot is like wokeism and things like that. And and I'm racist due merely to the fact that I'm white. Or that I must be punished as a result of the sins of people of my ancestors who we don't know what my ancestors did. I don't even know who they are. Don't know their names. Don't even know what they look like. And those are bad things, again, because the Bible says that you will die in your sins, not the sins of your great-grandfather, your great-great-grandfather, but you will die specifically in your sins. And this comes back to a good individualism, that you need to be judged based on who you are individually, not based on your generations that have gone before you. Nevertheless, we affirm that there are generational consequences as to what white people have done in the past, specifically in Alabama, where we are today.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important to understand, but nevertheless, we can't accept, again, these worldly ideologies that are bad. And mostly, a lot of that, I mean, there is no doubt that a lot of that comes from just a bunch of white people. You know what I mean? trying to prove their non-racism.
The whole white knights,
the
white saviors.
Yeah. And so that's unfortunate. And I don't want to be like, hey, the only thing we need to do is preach the gospel, because obviously I think one of the reasons that racism was fought so well by people like Martin Luther King Jr. is because they allowed their Christianity to have impacts in the culture, just like we were talking about. But nevertheless, I mean, I think there is a point that we've got to realize that you can't kowtow to the culture that accepts wokeism and things like that. You have to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and the gospel of Jesus Christ alone. That's what Paul said when he went to the church of Corinth. He said, "I've decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified."
I do want to add one quick thing, because
I'm ready.
I found it so absurd, because we were mentioning Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
Did you see what Joe Biden said about MLK's death?
I didn't. I'm scared to know.
He said, and this is I don't know where it was. I just saw a clip of it, so I could just be subjecting myself to out of context. But with what we've seen of Joe Biden so far, I don't know if there ever is context.
Yeah.
He said that not even MLK's death had the same impact as George Floyd's death. And that's verbatim.
Yeah.
And that hurt me. And I'm not even black, I don't have as much connection to it. I can have a spiritual connection to it with Christianity because MLK was Christian, that, but that still hurt me.
Yeah.
Goodness.
That's interesting. I would like to hear that and hear the context of that. That's, yeah.
The next clip is Heather talking about racial reconciliation.
Okay.
So she has some good takes.
Really, I mean, the question of, is racial reconciliation even possible with the church? I would say I have two natures. My pessimistic, fatalist self would say, absolutely not. Look at the world.
Yeah.
But, the side of me that's, redeemed would say, of course, with Christ, all things are possible. And He makes a way. But what I think people are not willing to recognize is that reconciliation costs more than the offense. So if you think about, if somebody breaks their leg, that break causes a lot of pain. Surgery will cause a lot of pain. But then the problem is not only do you have the break in the surgery, you're not fine until you work that thing out for months. Yeah. And what I've learned is they say, I think statistically, most people that go through rehab only heal to about 70%, because they think that's good enough. And when we, as churches, decide, oh, the world's falling apart, we're going to have a racial reconciliation series at our church for, 2 months or 2 weeks. Or, as I was told, we had somebody come on a Wednesday night to talk about this. What else can we possibly do?
Yeah.
And, I'm just like, okay, good. Thanks for that. I think to myself, in the scientific world, in the mental health world, actually, if there is an offense, or especially an ongoing abuse, it takes at least a third of the time to properly heal. And that's if you do everything properly.
Yeah.
So let's say if somebody goes through an abusive childhood, let's say they have been abused for 15 years. It's going to take them probably 3 to 5 years of constant work, brain work, mental work, to rewire their brains, their synapses, all of these, bad things that have been grown inside of them. Yeah. And that in the United States, we have a couple 100 years of problems. So, it's our responsibility to work those things out. Yeah, we can wait till we get to heaven, but to be honest, I think we're keeping people from it with our crappy testimonies of not being able to do that. Like we care too much about ourselves. We love our comfortable, complacent lives in this world too much.
Yeah. I love the analogy she had with the broken leg, first off.
Yeah.
Because, like, the pain happens, but then the actual recovery to get to fully recovered, so much time afterward. Even with, you know, the mental health things. Mm-hmm. So much time afterwards to actually fully heal from those things. And maybe that's just more proof to, like, generational curses that you were mentioning before, or generational sins, I should say. Like, the fruits of those. I don't think... I would love to see it in my lifetime, of course. I'm not saying that I won't see it in my lifetime. The church be able to reconcile race. But it seems like it could be a very long thing. I don't want it to be, but there's so much pain.
Yeah. So let me ask you. So I'm curious on this issue. So not to put you on the spot, but so what specifically? So what in your mind, what specifically needs to be reconciled with race right now? I mean, do you see, like, for instance, is it racist pastors that are issue right now, or is it that most churches in the South are majority white? Or not most churches, but there are such thing as if you're a white church, then you're probably 80-90% white. Is that the issue?
No, I don't think that it's because, I mean, you look at percentages of black people of the population and white people of the population, you would hope that would also match the church population. If a church is the same percentages there are whites in that state, you know, it kind of makes sense. But can I just say this? I hate to interrupt you.
Go
ahead.
Okay. I think a lot of white churches take this stance too. It's like, and I agree with that. Obviously, you know, if you know, you have based on your city demographics, that's probably what your church needs to look like. You know, but the means by which we go about that sometimes are faulty. I think because, for instance, if a white church says, well, we've got 85% white people in our church, but our city is 60% white, we need to get some more black people in here. That feels like racism to me.
Could be. It could be just, I think, because
in the opposite direction. But nevertheless, you're judging people based off the color of their skin. I want you here white because you're black.
Okay.
Or I want you here because you're white.
It's the intention of why they need more black people in the
that sense antithetical to the dream of Martin Luther King Jr., where we would judge people not based off the color of the skin, but the content of the character.
Yeah.
Right?
Now, it could be very specific to a specific city that has a white population and a black population, and the black population within this city specifically are not doing very well. And none of them are in your church, or very few of them are in your church.
Right.
Of course, you'd want to target those people because there's need, you know. But if it's just because like we're mostly white, but you know our Facebook cover photo needs more black people on it, you know, it's authoritarian in nature. Just like, I need this to have more control of the church. You know what I mean?
And it's interesting. I just got we had a mailer come to our house a few days ago from a church, and actually we've got a couple mailers from them, and each time. Diversity. It talks about how they're a diverse church. We're a diverse church. We're a diverse church. And, you know, I have obviously nothing wrong with that. I'm glad you're a diverse church, you know.
Yeah.
But it just seems to me, and I guess listen, we need diversity. Like if you're white, or even, it don't matter what color of your skin. If you're like, if someone can't attend your church because based off the color of their skin, obviously that's a sinful issue.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're judging people based off the color of sin, that's a sinful issue. But it seems to me, and I've heard people say this before, I'd be interested to hear your response to this, is that if your chief goal is diversity, and there's obviously nothing wrong with diversity because Jesus says, go make disciples of all nations, of all people groups, so we need to go, right?
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with that. But if the chief issue is diversity and not the gospel, because that is the chief issue, preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we believe that the gospel will do what it was intended to do. That's what Jesus said, that your word will go forth and it will not return void. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of God stands forever. So we need to preach the gospel and trust that the gospel will do what it was intended to do. And if we make diversity the chief issue, the problem is a subtle discrimination becomes the means. Because what we're doing is I need to, and I just see this in so many white churches, and I see this growing up, and it seems to me that this is the issue, is like, you know, if we judge people based off the color of their skin, I want you on the stage right now because of what the color of your skin is, and it's going to prove that we're not racist.
Yeah.
And that feels like racism to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And even because that exists, if you have someone who is of darker tone skin and they're actually really good at a talent that put on stage, you could still get the irklings that like I'm just on stage because I am this color. You know what I mean? And it's such a discredit to even if they were forced up there or put up there for a different reason other than their talent. It's I would hate that. It sucks.
Yeah.
You don't ever like as a creative myself. Like I'm always questioning if I'm good at what I'm doing. You know.
Yeah.
And so, and maybe to relate to that specific instance more so, I would hate to be put in a position where I never know if I'm actually good or not.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So a lot of people don't like the and I actually I've read a few people who don't like the using the term colorblind, that we're colorblind, that I don't want to see your skin. Listen, I know these are all thoughts that we're playing out, and so by next week we have changed our mind on this issue.
Yeah.
But I'm curious. I mean, do you think the ultimate goal here is a society that is colorblind, that says, listen, I'm not judging you by your skin color, I'm judging you by your character?
So I don't know if colorblind necessarily, like, I understand that it kind of supposed to mean that, like, oh, I don't see your color, I just see your character. Well, at the same time, there are valuable things to your race and culture that you generally come from. So, like, I don't see your culture, I just see your character of an individual, which may just be a result of really big, extreme individualism in America. Maybe extreme is the wrong word, but, you know, just progressing of individualism in America. So sometimes we get our own identity of who we are from, you know, our families, our backgrounds, our upbringings, you know, and if you're saying none of that matters to me, just how you act and if you're a good person matters to me, kind of discredits part of my identity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not that we need to be colorblind. Like you said, we don't, like, diversity itself is a tool. It's a problem solving tool.
That's a good way of putting it.
Diversity is really good at solving problems because it brings so many different perspectives onto a problem. And so, like, that's why people who don't, like, companies who don't involve or implement diversity into their problem solving in the marketplace fail. But like you said, with churches or companies as well, like isn't just a church thing.
Yeah.
If you're forcing the diversity, you lose the competence and qualifications part that needs to come with diversity.
Yeah.
And so I don't like the whole forced diversity thing. Like, that angers me a little bit beyond belief.
100%. So, and I agree with what you're saying. I believe, but I think the key word here is culture. Is that you are a product of your family's culture, where your families come from, generational culture, things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that when you identify that, and that makes you who you are.
Well, I don't want to say there's nothing wrong with your culture, because, like, obviously people come from cultures that have some bad aspects.
Yeah,
to them.
But my point being is that there's nothing wrong with your identity being intertwined with the culture of who you are. Obviously, if there's something wrong with culture, you need to change who you are to some degree or another. For example, if being white means you're racist because you come from a cultural background that's racist, you probably need to change that. So obviously, there are cultures that have sinful aspects to them. My point being is that if part of your culture makes you who you are, there's nothing wrong with that, and that being part of your identity. And if that has something to do, anyway, that has nothing wrong with your identity. We need to recognize that. But I think mainly and chiefly what we need to do is go along. I think Martin Luther King Jr. got it right on this issue. Is judge people based off of who are they good people, who they are, and you know, and so if I'm interviewing a black person and a white person, I mean, if I'm interviewing a black person or a white person, I mean, for instance, do you think there's something sinful? Listen, I'm a big Christian, and so I'm using everything in Christian terms, but there's something sinful in me saying, well, I mean, the white person's white and I got a black person, and so I'm judging people based off the color of their skin.
Yeah,
there's a sinful aspect to that.
It's tough.
Okay, I'm not sure, man. These are good things that I think we need to work out.
Yeah, and I know it's the point of the show to talk about them, and like, I don't think we'll always have the right answers on the show. Mm-hmm. I think more so the process of getting to the right answers is what we need to figure out. So, I mean, of course, like, how do I want to say it? Generally, if you're talking about interviewing for a job, right? Mm-hmm. So, one interesting problem that's faced, normally when you're hiring for a job, you want someone that fits into the culture of your business, right?
Yeah.
Now, here's the problem with that. What is the culture of your business? It's mostly just the creator of the business's personality, who they get along with, their inherent understandings of things. So it's possible to inadvertently not hire people of different races or backgrounds than you because you don't immediately connect because you don't have that like inherent understanding and similar upbringing. Right. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying like they're trying to do bad, you know, but like as a church, we kind of need to be on the forefront of a lot of things, but the forefront of, I think, just like we were talking about earlier, unifying it, like making these connections to understand someone else's upbringing or different cultural ideas. Because, of course, culture doesn't always lead us to salvation by any means.
100%.
Culture, if left by itself, will run you into the ground.
Yeah.
Every time, no matter what culture you're a part of. It's only Jesus that redeems things.
Yeah.
And so, but like when you're brought up in a culture, your worldview and mind is shaped around it. So you see things through this darkened lens. And so like we still have to connect with one another. And if we are in two different cultures that don't see anything eye to eye or very little eye to eye, as a Christian, we still have to make that bridge and gap.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I agree with that. And I think, just to be clear, I think that there's nothing wrong with understanding that racism has been a huge issue for our country, and in still many ways we're probably working that out. And there's growing pains to that, and we're experiencing that right now.
Well, of course, I mean, when you're one of the most diverse countries in the world, you're going to have racial problems.
Yeah, especially given our history.
Especially given our history.
Yeah, and so I think it's important for us to continually. I don't know if there's even a time, but for us to re-examine ourselves and to understand that racism is completely evil, and it needs to be abolished from the face of the earth. And but I will say, I think we as a society in the West specifically have come a really long way on that issue. And I think people in kind of the woke community and things like that have not recognized that.
And in a surprisingly short amount of time, too.
Yeah.
I'm not saying all the problems are gone and we've solved everything by any means, but like if you look at human history in general and how long problems lasted, and conflicts between different types of people lasted, compared to how we're working on this in America now, it still sucks that we have these problems, and it still sucks that we all want to fix them to some degree, and we all need to be humble ourselves to be able to fix these problems. Right. But like comparatively, we're doing empirically well.
Yeah, 100%.
Not saying we're doing perfect.
Yep.
But empirically, compared to the rest of human history, we're doing well.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that, and we've come a very long way, and our faith has played a really important role in diminishing and getting rid of course, slavery and then racism in our land, and I think that's really important to understand. But anyway, I think racism is evil, and I think what she was saying, I forget her name now.
Heather.
Heather is a really important point to make. I think we need as people, especially in the South, to be intentional about building bridges to the other side, building relationships. If there's going to be any sort of reconciliation, like she said, there needs to be relationships that are built in that area.
So before we go on to the next thing, I do want to say one kind of hot topic thing here.
Okay.
When we talk about it being the South and whatever, and the South has the stereotype of being more racist and stuff, I feel like it's not necessarily the case anymore, at least.
Okay.
It's kind of equal everywhere in America. It's like it's not just a Southern thing anymore. And it may be more so like where larger populations are, and more of those larger populations are in the northern areas of the country. That may be where the more conflict is, only because there's more people there. But I feel like it's not just a Southern thing anymore.
Yeah, well, I will say there is a Southern aspect to it. I would suggest that. Listen, California definitely has their issues.
Of course.
This is a caveat. I'm about to California has their issues, but I would you still see in the South every once in a while guys with their big lifted trucks with their tennis balls up at the top and a big rebel flag, going.
That's like larger than their truck for some reason.
Yeah, that's
like
larger than their truck. I don't think they understand what they're doing. That's number one. But
they were told it means one thing, and they don't have the humility to understand.
That's a really good point, actually. That's a really good word, the humility. I think there needs to be humility in this issue. And listen, when all this broke out with a lot of pastors embracing wokeism, stuff like that, I was very critical of that. At the same time, the flag of Mississippi, where I'm from, had the Confederate symbol in the flag, and Mississippi did a really good thing and took that out. And I think that was a really good move, and that showed a lot of humility in that area. That we're not loyal to that symbol. And so if that represents oppression or racism to our brothers and sisters in our community and our society, man, we need to show a lot of humility.
Yeah.
And in not representing that. And in my opinion, for some reason, people in the South, I hate to tag it this way, but a lot of the redneck people would say, I'm not saying that, but nevertheless people would say that, seems to be like to have some sort of loyalty to that symbol. And that's so disappointing to me. It really is. And so listen, that's not to say that the rest of the country and the society at large has issues when we're fighting racism.
Yeah.
On
it's kind of a niche issue in the South.
Yeah. But it seems like we're just like, I don't understand that issue. We need to show humility in that area, I think.
And I'm from the Midwest up north, so I don't understand it at all.
Yeah.
Because I have no upbringing in it.
Right.
It's always been made fun of where I'm at.
Right.
They're still flying this flag,
Yeah.
So it's never made sense.
It is laughed at a lot and scoffed at. I mean, when I see it, I'm like, oh my goodness.
But honestly, laughing at it and scoffing at it only builds the loyalty towards it.
You're probably right. Yeah. It's part of that issue where, it enlarges that community and the loyalty within that community when they realize they're we're different than everyone else. We fly this
legitimizes.
This flag. Yeah, that's 100%.
The pain that they're receiving from it, legitimizes their belief.
You're putting it in really good words right now. I agree with that 100%. Yep.
So Christians need to stop making fun of stupid people.
I agree with that. We need to find a better solution. I just
did it right there too.
We need to. I have nothing to add to that. I thought it does give them a form of legitimacy to criticize it in such a way that we do, laugh it off when it's a real issue and we need to find solutions.
And
to
like
that
Heather
issue.
said, it's a relational thing. We have to be.
That's a good point.
Relational.
That's a good point.
If you actually want to change someone's mind or bring them to Christ,
probably presenting that sort of people with the real hurt and the real pain that comes from that, that can come from that as a result of someone who is different than us looking at that and realizing the pain and depression that brought their ancestors in the past.
If I want to say something nice about the kind of people we're talking about right now,
yeah,
the kind of loyalty that they kind of have to these things is actually admirable. Mm-hmm. Why can't the Christians in our church have that same kind of loyalty that they have? That they'll fly it around all over the city, like a cross in the back of their truck or something that's not as cringe throughout the city, and will fight anyone.
Yeah.
Maybe not necessarily fight, but you know what I mean? Stand their ground, like you're saying, engaging
with
people who are trying to disagree with them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I agree with that. I think that we need to fly our flag. I'm speaking metaphorically, but
metaphorically. I don't think we have a flag.
Yeah. Well, we do. We got that white flag, that Christian. But anyway, I've seen people fly it. But nevertheless, we need to fly ours as bold as well. So,
what time? How much time we got?
I don't know.
Okay, I'll try to skip some of these here so we can get more. So, we were talking about truth. Let's go to this one. So okay. I was talking with Pastor Stephen. Kind of about a society at large, and that kind of fits into what we've been talking about, how it kind of pushes ungratefulness on us.
Okay.
Thanksgiving and stuff. Thanksgiving kind of ties in. I do want to add, I think I had COVID while recording this episode, so
gotcha.
I'm making that known to everybody here.
You're not wearing a mask?
No.
Just kidding.
In a virtual interview.
Well, Joe Biden did one time in a virtual with other world leaders. He wore a mask.
I just want to point out that okay.
The dude doesn't remember where.
If you think you should wear a mask or not wear a mask, okay, more power to you. But some of the just logistical means of these wearings of mask have made me laugh so hard.
Yeah.
Like, you're in a small studio in front of a camera, 10 feet away from everybody, on a camera, in front of a camera by yourself.
Yeah.
Why are you wearing a mask?
I agree 100%. I think the same thing when I see people walking outside by themselves.
Yeah.
Well, why are you wearing a mask? Probably somebody today walking
Outside
the
in
beach
general,
doing it.
like,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry, I just wanted to laugh at that a little bit.
Yeah, we could keep going, but
The whole idea of gratefulness, because that's kind of the idea of what Thanksgiving was all along. We can toss aside whatever the controversies regarding Thanksgiving is, but it's more so just the idea of Thanksgiving and what it's supposed to be is taking time to be thankful for what we have versus what we do not have. And that gratefulness / Thanksgiving part seems to be taken like a little less and less seriously as time seems to go on. Is that something I'm just observing, or are you observing that as well?
Yeah, no, I think you're right, John. Good question. I think that here's the thing is, you know, it is hard for people to be grateful. We as a culture have a hard time with it because our culture is more prone to ingratitude. You know, our society pushes it. You know, everybody's trying to provide content on social media, and you can have the most likes and the most watched show yesterday, but today, if you only get one like or one repost or one comment, you're totally sunk. And so I think that there's this push to always produce something that people want. And I think that it's hard to be grateful when we're facing so much rejection coming from online.
I like the whole thing of when he was talking about we spend so much time trying to create things societal wise that people want.
yeah.
Oftentimes, when it comes to the gospel, there's things of the gospel that we want, of course.
Yeah.
There's also a lot that we don't inherently want. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
the work and the
100%.
all that stuff. So it's interesting bringing there's so much rejection that we face every day.
Mm.
Like why would I be grateful for every day putting stuff out? You know, just regular interaction online and receiving nothing back. Of course, that's going to be rejection. That's pain. Why would I be grateful for those kind of things? And so, it's kind of inherently creating ungratefulness in us. If that makes sense.
No, I agree with that. I think that we do have an issue, and this is a first world problem, no doubt. But I think we do have an issue with being grateful. But I think it comes down to because we don't know what sacrifice is. You know, we don't know what it means to give up something, to work hard for something. That's not everyone. I'm speaking in general terms, obviously. But you know, I think we have an issue with ingratitude. There is no doubt. But I don't know what the solution to that is specifically. But I think that recognizing responsibility and being grateful for the lives that we have. We're always wanting more, aren't we?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We are always wanting more.
Yeah, and I think contentment is a part of that. Listen, there's nothing inherently wrong. I guess there is sometimes, depending on how much you want, but it depends on where your
intentions are.
Yeah,
which no one can prove what they are except for God.
So it's so subjective.
Yeah.
It's I guess it's what your larger focus is in life. But I think there's a healthiness that comes when people live with a spirit of gratitude in their life. I think there's a clip in here somewhere, you don't have to play it, but where he quoted, 1 Thessalonians about being grateful in everything, right?
Yeah.
And that's a biblical principle, a Christian value that I think is worth having in our society today.
I unfortunately don't have that clip queued up.
It's okay. You don't have to
play
play it.
I do have another one of him when he's talking. Well, let me just show you what I'm talking about.
I love it when people who have had extraordinary hardship don't see themselves as a victim. Because then you have a lot to be grateful for. And it doesn't matter how much you amass. If you see yourself as a victim, you believe fundamentally that I would have been at a better place if it hadn't been for XYZ.
I mean, you nerf your own capability if you have the position of a victim. Like,
your capacity to do literally anything gets just squandered if you believe you're a victim. And of course, people who are affected by things are a literal victim, but you still have to overcome the hardship you faced. Otherwise, if you live in that, you're going to
self-destruct.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that. So I think for all of those reasons, it's hard for people to stay grateful, and people love complaining. I mean, think about the news. In the last 25 years where we've seen news.
I mean, we talked about literally this earlier, so I'm not going to make us go through that again. But the whole part of people love complaining. Yeah. There's some like actual good feeling you get when you complain, because like if you complain and someone else agrees with your complaint, like you feel heard. 2, it's like a shared pain that you're understanding, even if it's like a very minute, annoying thing. Mm-hmm. But of course, we're not supposed to be complaining. Yeah. Gratefulness is one of the, I feel like gratefulness is one of those things where, like, it's like built into a lot of Christian values unknowingly.
You're right.
But like when you get more and more into it, you realize, oh, there's actually a lot I need to be grateful for.
Right.
And we talked about it on this podcast. Like, we go to bed in a 72-degree house
100%.
With running water,
100%,
with trash that's taken out once a week.
I don't even know how it happens.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's so much to be grateful for, and and we were saying this on that podcast, that there's, even if this is what Pastor Stephen said, even if there are things in my life that are giving me pain, I still need to think about how much my life is being made easier as well. Yeah. And you can find comfort in that. Like, there's comfort in gratefulness.
Yeah. No, 100%. I agree with that. And I think that was such a good point that he made with the victim culture that we live in. Yeah. Our culture right now has made victimhood like it's an inherent good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like martyrdom. Like it's like a martyrdom that we can all bear and wear.
Yeah, and the problem with that is that when you see yourself as a victim, move forwarding in life, you think that there's no way for you to move forward because you think the system is against you. Yeah. You know what I mean? And the Bible teaches as well, speaking of gratefulness and personal responsibility and all those things, the Bible teaches that you have value, that you have common grace on you, that God has made you in His image and in His likeness, and that He's given you dominion. This is Genesis chapter 1-3, and He's given you dominion. And if you're a Christian, He's given you the power of the Holy Spirit in your life. Yeah. And so you can live a life of victory, and you can live a life that makes impact on our world. And I do think that part of that is realizing how good of a life that you have. Yeah. Right? And realizing how much value that you have, and realizing that you are loved. I think this is important. Why you should believe in a God, to believe that life isn't purposeless, that there is a purpose to life, that there is value.
It's not all an accident.
Yeah, it's not all an accident. And so you're grateful for things in your life because and again, I hate to keep going to Scripture, but that's all that I know, especially if you're a Christian.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Here, Romans 8:28 says that all things work together for good to those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. And what Joseph said in Genesis chapter 50:20 is that what you meant for evil, God meant for good. And so when you take a Christian worldview about what's going on in life, you can even be grateful in the midst of hard times and understanding that it's making you to be the person that God has called you to be. And that's what we don't want to focus on a lot of times, is that the difficult issues that we go through in life, we want to make it as if we're a victim, but we don't understand that sometimes going through the fire refines you and makes you the person that you are. And so I think gratefulness really gives you a focus that makes you stand out in the modern world that we live in today.
And if you can understand gratefulness, you start to inherently understand honor and respect.
Yeah. Yep.
And just other things that not necessarily place people higher up on the social scale, but you can understand. You can be more understanding, more. What's the other word I'm thinking of? You can just relate to people more so because you understand how much good is in your life. And so when there's pain in someone else's life, you can take your, I guess, state of joy and bring that into their pain.
100%. Yeah, go ahead.
And I wanted to make a quick differentiation between happiness and pain.
Right.
And maybe we can end it on this conversation because we're just going deeper into gratefulness.
Yeah, we're all right.
Joy is a choice, and happiness is an emotion. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I've had pushback to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could talk about it, but yeah, I think in general that's a good point to be made.
Because my only backing to it is like happiness is something that comes and goes in time.
Right.
And you can enjoy it when you're happy. Like if you're happy at the moment, revel in that. Be grateful for the times that you were happy and for times to come that we'll be happy again. But being joyous and zealous in life is like it's like love. It's a decision you make. I'm going to be joyous in times that I'm not happy, if that makes sense.
Right.
I think it's an important distinction, especially for first world Christians. Like it's a niche topic for more so like, you know, America, where we aren't starving every day in large numbers, I should say. And so it's something I think that would help in with a lot of the problems in America today. Like if we start understanding more of these concepts of like love, joy, peace, patience, and like understanding those and how they apply to our life entirely. Is that like,
and I think that totally makes sense. And I feel like I keep interrupting you, but
no, it's a conversation.
I was just going to say that joy, and I think that's so important to understand. I think joy and gratefulness are cultivated in a life. They're not just. I'm not saying that if you don't believe in God, or if you don't have any ultimate values, or believe in some sort of objective reality, that you can't have joy or peace.
Of course not. Yeah.
But what I am saying is that I believe they are cultivated in a society and in a person at best that understands that there is, I don't know, keep going back to this, but again, that there is a meaning to life. There's a deeper meaning to life, that death is not the end. And I think that's so important to think about in your life, the meaning of your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That your work is not just a hard day's work and you come in and it's over, but you're passing along things to your children, that you have a wife, or you have a husband, or you have friends that you're loving, that listen, that beauty is not just chemical reactions going off in your brain.
Yeah.
But there is an objective reality to that. There are things that are beautiful, that love actually means something.
Yeah.
Again, it's not just
chemical reaction in your brain.
Yeah.
I hate that argument so much.
Yeah. But and I think gratefulness and honor. I love the point that you made about honor. It's not, honor is not just going up, but it's going down as well. Again, historically, that has been a distinctively Christian value, and in a culture where everything is so power driven. I mean, so power driven. How I want to establish my own way and establish my brand or whatever that is. Especially when you're thinking in terms of social media.
I'm going to gain so much social power, or I'm going to gain so much economic power or political power. Like seeking out these venues to just amass power in those realms. Yeah,
I think it's so important for us to understand that people who are even quote unquote below us, how you would even deem someone below you, but but nevertheless that we honor them with our lives. And again, I think that's so important. I think that's something that younger generations, I hate to talk about that divide when you just spoke about how we need to heal that divide, but nevertheless, I think that's something younger generations, in order to give fault to some older generations, I don't think we've passed that along well.
No.
We haven't passed those values along well, and as younger generations, we need to learn to cultivate them. And I think that comes from having understanding the value of religious experience in our lives.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, it's been a really great conversation.
It has been fun. I enjoy coming on, John.
Thank you guys for listening to this podcast. If you did enjoy the show, please be sure to like and follow the podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, be sure to subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, be sure to subscribe. This podcast wouldn't be possible without you guys listening and having some interest in the show. Season 1 has been a great go. I appreciate everybody who's left comments or shared the podcast or just enjoyed the show in general and told me about it in person. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I look forward to Season 2, and I hope you do as well. Thank you. Bye.